Hello, everyone. Hi. Welcome to our fall town hall. It's so exciting to have everyone here with us today. Thank you for coming and joining us. I hope you enjoy what we're presenting today and being here. So, I have a couple of reminders. The first one is that we have a Q&A box down there at the bottom of the webinar that you can post your questions and or comments. We will follow up with those at a later time. Also, we have two poll questions that will come out during our time together today to encourage you to think through some things and give us your feedback about a couple of topics. So we'll have two opportunities for that. And then in the spring, our spring town hall, we had some incredible feedback through our polls. So thank you for that. And we're going to go ahead and do that again today during our time together. All right, next slide, please. So I've got the agenda posted here for you today. First, we'll review a little bit about town halls and what the purpose is and how it works together with the center itself. The second thing is that we'll give you some highlights from year one. It was a busy year, our first year. We've just finished up quite a few things from that year. We'll have a few new resources on the website for you, and I want to make sure that you know about them and where to find them. Then really the most exciting part about today is our panel. We have two panelists with us today who are just precious people who are part of our team. The last thing we'll do is cover part of our work for next year, because that is going to be about faculty and their experience with accessibility. We're really excited to see what you think, some of the questions that we should ask across the country to our faculty out there so we can learn about what their experience is as faculty. So that's what we're prepping and planning for next year. So I'd like to go back to the beginning of the agenda and kind of remind everyone the purpose of a town hall. So we have some goals for our center, and those include being in touch with and networking with people across the country, having a dialogue and sharing what's going on, not just via email, but more of a face-to-face sort of experience. And so that's why we're here today. This is our fall town hall, and we'll have one in the spring. It's for us to review some data and what's happening within the center with people sharing their experiences. So I'm very excited to have an opportunity to share this with you and have a chance to see what you think about what's been happening and what's going to happen and get some of your feedback. As a reminder, we have 10 studies that we'll be conducting over the course of the 5 years. We just finished one, and I think we've been involved. We've got our hands in about 5 different studies, and we've completed 2. So we'll give you some of that information and some of those resources today. And our goal in general is to build some foundational research for higher ed to support disabled students in those spaces. That includes technical colleges, 2-year and 4-year colleges and universities. So if you'd like some additional information, please do go to our website. We've got a lot of information about the different things and our goals for the next 5 years. Next slide. So year one, it was outstanding. We built so many things from scratch. It was really great, and it was an incredible team effort. You all know what it means to partner and collaborate with outstanding people. We've got disabled students on our team that we work with. We've got faculty members. We have full-time staff, researchers, all of these different people that we partner with. We've got an evaluation team, and each person is just integral to our success. We have 2 goals, really. One is research, and the second is outreach. Those are our overarching purposes. And year one, our first goal was to really understand and think about how we learn about a student's perspective and their experience about accessibility, about their experience as a disabled person on campus and sort of everything that they do. So we had three studies that focused primarily on students. One was a campus access measure. We developed that measure really thinking about different ways people think about experiencing access on a campus, in a classroom and outside of the classroom setting. So we'll be finishing up that. We finished up the measuring and we are going to be releasing it soon. Another one that we did some interviews with students. That was a big project that we did, interviewing 25 students across the country just to understand the different types of intersectional experiences that they have. Students from a variety of backgrounds, with also with disabilities, their accessibility experiences, the context and environment, the accommodation. It's so exciting, and the coding for that study is happening right now. And that matched up with the survey that we had. So it's a combined study. Those two things go together. The third study that we've been working on is CCSSE, Community College Student Engagement Survey. There was a secondary study for that set, and really we're taking a look at community college students with disabilities, taking a deep dive into that and how they progress through enrollment, then retention and achievement and completion. What does that look like for them? And so the secondary analysis is very exciting. We're partnering with people within that center, and it's very exciting. And the results should be available soon. We're developing the paper now, and all of that is in the works. So those three key studies were big. We took a deep dive on student life and experience for that first year. And so the next thing we wanted to do was increase our networking abilities, and that includes our town halls. We've developed a website which is really expanded. You'll be able to see that here in a moment. We have a newsletter that's very important part for us in terms of communicating out in the field. So many of you maybe know us through our newsletter. The last thing, and finally, is we have some more social media outlets and channels that we're involved when we've hired someone who's just incredible in that area with that skill set. And so we're as full to capacity as possible, fully staffed and just ready to go. One thing from last year, our spring town hall that we noticed was so great were our polls, the poll questions. It was a major shift for us in terms of how we think about our work. And we want to do that again. So that's our plan for today. Our first poll will be up in a moment, and it is a handful of questions, a handful of options here. We want to know what's important to you. So, of these 5 options, we'd like for you to choose a single answer. You should see it populated now up on your screen. So, if you go ahead and click which one is the most important to you, and it's going to be about 1 minute, just so you know. And if you'd like to add in the chat box why you chose one over the other or why that one's your favorite, that'd be great. We'd love to read about that some more. All right, let's take a look here. So about half of you said development of campus accessibility measure that was really important to you. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we're hopeful that people are going to use that measure when it's released and out in the community and just leverage that for your practice, your own research. It'll be a great tool. It seems that the second most popular response here today is the student interview project. I agree. I agree with you. And that was a fun one. It was so fun for us because we got to interact with people, students, and really from everywhere, all over the nation. And so It was a lot of different perspectives and engagements. It was really exciting for us to see how they were able to let us know what's going on in their lives as young people out in the world and on campuses. So we will absolutely let you know the results and more about that when the time comes. At the last most popular vote is understanding disabled students in community college. Again, I agree. The community college lens is really different, and I think it's important to understand that and kind of take a look at that more closely. And so the findings from that were really great. So it's like, how can that information at that level of the post-secondary experience be leveraged, and how can that translate to different experiences in different spaces for those students? Thank you for that feedback. We hope you enjoyed today as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's next in year two? This is sort of what we got on board for us. There are about 5 things over here. So campus spotlights, and that is a part of our research study series. We're focusing on what initiatives and programs and campus administrations are trying to do to improve accessibility on their campuses. We have a few examples already that we're going to be spotlighting. We're spotlighting managers, administrators, campus leaders, and really supporting their work as they're out there advocating for and supporting students with disabilities. Are really awesome examples of what people can do to help improve campus access and improve student success on those campuses. The second thing that we're looking forward to in year two, and it's coming up real soon, it's a webcast that we've got scheduled. It's sort of similar to a town hall in one way, is that it's via Zoom, which is what we're doing today, but it's more of a presentation, we're developing a bunch of online content to provide foundational concepts and ideas of what we're seeing when we jump into that research and the practices and disabilities in a higher education setting. It's really important to get these foundational concepts and ideas in place that we're all on the same page. So it'll be live and it'll be recorded. You are welcome to come join us. There'll be opportunities for Q&A as well. But again, it's going to be sort of building on it's a space to build future modules out. And so right now you should see on your screen a QR code that should be there. And if you want to go ahead and click on that and join us, we'd love to have you. The next slide is about the learning hubs, or the learning hub. And so that space, that learning hub, is a really awesome part of our expansion for our website. We want to have resources available and searchable for people to be able to get access to what they need. And maybe they don't even know what they need. And so it's easier to see some new things that you can consider. And there are a handful of things that are already there in that space at the Learning Hub. And we hope to expand soon with the tags and the labels, so that way it can match our audiences and what they're looking for. It's very exciting to see that. The link has now been put into the chat box for your convenience. And if you ever want to know what's going on, that's the first place to go. Check there. Our resource development will be there first and foremost, so you can check us out there. So within that Learning Hub, you'll also find research reviews. So if you go down to the next slide, that'll show what the review number 1 right here. It's our first one. It's just been released very recently. It's the Disabled Students Within the United States in Post-Secondary Education. The authors on our panel today, so we're really excited about that. But this review is for building research agreements, or whatever documentation you need. Just take a look. And so common statistics and an approach. It's a really nice format, and it's available on the website itself, on our webpage, and then it's also available in a PDF format, so it's downloadable and super easy to access. So the link for that directly has also been put in the chat just now. It's really exciting to see that. And so that leads me to the next part of today. So we're going to take kind of a deep dive into both the author, who, why, what motivated that writing and that review, and also part of the center and what the goals look like and how we're making those happen, and to really understand the research translation piece. And that's part of the outreach goal that we have set for our center. Now we have a research goal, as I've mentioned. That's when we collect the data and we get it all together and take a look at it. But now this piece is when it's more of the research within the field and those specific topics. And we've got a series planned right now. We are going to have a chat with those who wrote number one. So I would like to invite our guest today. The first is one of my students, Ryan Mata. If you join us, Ryan. Hi. Hey, Ryan. Ryan is a graduate student here at the College of Education, and he is almost ready to propose his dissertation. He's getting there. It's super exciting. I'm very excited for you, Ryan. And Ryan just jumped right in with us on the ground floor with setting up the center. And so it's just a joy to work with him, and I love it. I'd like to also introduce Maura Borrego, and she is on faculty here. Hey, hi. School of Engineering. Thank you for joining us. And she's part of our faculty cadre that we've got. Such a critical part of our research team and our community altogether. So welcome to both of you. Thank you both for joining us today. I'm thrilled to have you both with us. So my first question for you is about the two of you. I'd love some more background information about your background, anything that you'd like to share with the group here today. And why are you interested in the topic of disabled students in higher education settings and the research and researching student success? What motivates that specific topic that we're doing here, working with here at the center? So Ryan, I'll hand it to you first.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see all of you. My name is Ryan. I am a doctoral research affiliate for the National Disability Center. I'm also a PhD candidate at the Department of Educational Psychology at UT Austin. So a little bit about my research interests, which kind of, spoiler alert, overlap very much with the Disability Center. I take a particular research interest in understanding experiences of disability from diverse student perspectives. In particular, I'm interested in learning more about how those students engage in their programs, whether those are online programs or on campus, and, kind of take an interest in thinking about engagement both in terms of academics and classes, which is probably what a lot of us think about when we think higher education, but also engagement in a social sense. So kind of with that dual sense of what engagement means, I use both quantitative and statistical methods, but also qualitative methods like, deep dive interviews, to learn a little bit more about those student experiences and hear about those things in their own words. And so I find that in my research, there ends up being this emphasis on the environment, the social environment and the learning environment, and how that plays a role in, facilitating that student experience, that college experience that everybody, highly covets. And so I'm interested in hearing a little bit about what facilitates that experience, but also what might inhibit that experience or make it a little bit harder to participate in that environment. Because I see higher education not as a place to only learn about specific content and gain expertise in a certain subject, but also to grow as a person socially. And so it's very important to be able to engage on both of those fronts. So broadly, my goal is to help use that research to drive change in higher education, whether that's in community colleges, technical trade programs, or four-year institutions. And, that's where I really lean into my role with the Disability Center, translating that research into some insight that can be used to create action. That's my goal, and a little bit about myself. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you for sharing that, Ryan. That's awesome to see your goals really develop and evolve over time and to where they are today. Dr. Borrego, really, you are such a valuable part of our team. I would love if you'd share some more about your background and how and how you got here. How'd you get here with
Yeah.
us?
Well, as Stephanie briefly mentioned, I'm a faculty member in engineering coming to you from one of our engineering buildings on campus. That's where I sit. But I made a career change when I finished up my PhD, and I have been doing education research exclusively for about 20 years. So my background, though, is that I went all the way through my PhD in engineering education. And if you know anything about STEM, those are not very welcoming or inclusive environments. Things are hard, sometimes maybe just for the sake of being hard. We value things like thinking really quickly on your feet and putting in really long hours, maybe standing in the lab. And all of those things are not very inclusive to many different kinds of people, but those are certainly ableist norms that we have in these STEM fields. And so my motivation in getting into this was just to make things better. I didn't have a great experience when I was a student. I want things to be better for all the people that come behind me. I feel like I have one of the best jobs in the world. In addition to doing all this research, I get to teach really interesting classes and work with great students on research and in the classes. So Ryan, of course, being an example of one of the people I get to work with in this situation. I also have a daughter who's deaf, so I spend some of my free time trying to get more involved in the deaf community here in Austin, practice my American Sign Language, and I'm no expert in elementary education, but I do feel like something that I can do is really understand what's happening in higher education, help change the system, and at the very least understand the best strategies that students can employ so that we're ready when she goes to college. And then one more motivation of this is that I think it's just a really well-run center. And I love being engaged and involved and just watching some of the ways that Stephanie leads us and brings people together. I'm just sort of selfishly wanting to learn some skills in that area too.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind. Thank you so much. And so I briefly mentioned before the research review, and that's part of our outreach process. So this is the first one. You took this and ran with it. You did a brilliant job. The hardest one's the first one always. And so you made it look real easy. And so from your perspectives, I wonder how you would describe the research review process and what that looked like for each of you. What did it make you think about? How did you do it? And what advice might you have for those researchers and people who are thinking about the translation piece and wanting to do that? What makes it a good process? And we will start with Maura first this time.
Okay, great. Well, I will say publicly that Ryan did 99% of the work on the research review. So that's all the good parts about it are Ryan, and the things that you don't like about it are me, certainly. But to talk about disseminating research, education as a field and engineering as a field, they're both very applied. And so it doesn't even occur to us maybe to even try to do things that don't have an impact or don't have a possibility of impact. We're not curious about the things just for the sake of understanding how they work. I think we really do want to help situations and change things and make things better for people. So my advice when we think about translating research would be to know your audience or know your audiences. So think really clearly about who is it that you're speaking to when you're writing anything up, a research review or a translation document or any of those things, who is it that you're speaking to? Where do those people get their information from? What arguments might they find most persuasive if you want to get them to change how they do things? And what evidence might they want to see to help them convince them to change? So I'm personally partial to faculty, studying faculty members and trying to get them to change how they do things. I still place students at the center, and I want to advocate for students, and we collect data from students about their interactions with faculty members, for example, requesting accommodations. But I do think a lot of the change needs to come from the faculty members, and they need to be aware of what they're doing and how they could do better with students.
Thank you for that. Ryan, same question.
Yeah, I think I'll start just by acknowledging my own kind of thoughts about research translation. I think it's super, super valuable and important to be able to translate research, especially to a diverse, range of audiences. As academics, kind of making our work not only available, but kind of digestible and then accessible and even like visually appealing are all important parts of bridging this gap that I see between what we find in academic spaces and what actually makes it out to our stakeholder groups, including other educators and administrators, maybe even policymakers and families. So closing that gap is very important. And I think there's a lot of things that we do find in those academic spaces that doesn't make it out. And that's kind of a bummer. So in making this first research review, I wanted that to be a goal and to sort of set a standard for how we present on things that are so nuanced, like disability in higher education, to a broad audience. So with that being said, there are a lot of things to discuss when it comes to, post-secondary education and disability. And so the challenge there is that for me as a disabled student, everything seems important. I want to talk about everything, but you only have so much space and so much attention of the folks that you're giving this information to. And so there's kind of like a curation process, a little bit of selection that happens. And so I have my own biases for that from my own lived experience. And it's important that we acknowledge that what we select is important, but it also says something when we do not include certain forms of information. And so this is kind of a back and forth process that I'm going through when I'm making the research review as a product. And also making sure that things are accurate and up to date because we know that the landscape of higher education is changing, especially in the midst of the pandemic. A lot of changes have happened, and there are a lot of new avenues actually to engage in higher education, which is exciting and important to communicate to folks. So, I would kind of echo what Maura said in terms of giving advice. Clear research translation, I think, is the best way to clearly indicate to folks what changes need to be made. And so if it helps, kind of think about the needs of whatever stakeholder groups you're communicating to. Think about what students need and what administrators or instructors need. And then from that needs-based approach, sort of work backward from there. And that can kind of help, with that curation process, that selection process of how you would describe something as broad as disability in higher education.
Thank you for that. And I'd like to add one thing as well about the process itself. So you all developed the content, you wrote it out, you researched what the key themes were, all of that. And we have a communications team here that has designed the website and develop the copy and the language, and you've worked together how to set up the idea visually in terms of how to choose the quotes and the statistics that are shared, paragraphs and things like that that are important. And so coming together, design plus language, in addition, information. Now, I'm not trained in the UX and all of that. There are some people who add richly to the conversation in terms of what does translation mean. It's not always simple. It's not always the summary or the summation, but it's also what you can see and how you can present it visually and how people navigate through that information. And it's very different than the research and constructing an academic article. And so I just wanted to add that in terms of the process. It's just such a varied experience and it's part of the process. Sometimes I find that it's overlooked. So to have that included, I think is valuable. So I'd like to jump to the content of the review because the topic that I assigned to you all was very broad. Post-secondary students with disabilities? Wow. Like, what do we need to know? It was a lot. So, in terms of the findings, like, what themes really caught your attention and you thought, oh, this is critical to know? And so then you chose that and put it in the review. So, if you want to talk about the content itself, what jumped out at you as what was so valuable and that you included in the review? Ryan, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, definitely. The first thing that comes to mind is the narrative that we tell about disability in higher education, being very centered on enrollment, enrollment statistics from the government. Of course, those rely on institutional reporting, national surveys for financial aid, things like that. And what we see broadly is, decades of kind of increased enrollment statistics, increased representation in higher ed across different types of institutions. And yet there are some gaps sort of between enrollment and then persistence, degree achievement, and then eventually life after college in terms of labor force participation. And so what's interesting about that pattern is that there's sort of a key difference between the strides that we've made in getting to college versus what we are doing to help disabled students get through college. And then kind of taking a step back, it also tells me a lot about how, as researchers, we tell the narrative about disabled student success in higher education, because we see a lot of focus on enrollment statistics. And so that tells me that maybe we need to start looking at other forms of data and other signifiers of what it means to succeed in higher education. It's definitely great to be able to get your foot in the door. That's the first step for sure in the journey of higher ed. But that's the thing, it's just the first step. And so institutions really need to focus on how they're supporting disabled students. And that's really the goal of our center, is support, while students are actually enrolled in college. And then kind of taking a deeper dive into those forms of support. Like I mentioned earlier, you have academic forms of support and also social forms of support. You also have kind of your formal tracks that people follow. Academic accommodations, a lot of times is, highly associated with support for disabled students. But there are also other initiatives on campus that are available to all students, but can be very helpful for disabled undergraduates in terms of fostering a sense of belonging or relatedness to other folks who are, on their campus or in their program. And also, looking at things like engagement. So I think that that's what the narrative is saying, is that there are some other things that we can look at in terms of how we're supporting disabled students. And one of those is going to be universal supports. So let's not just assume that folks can get those formal accommodations, because that's a very complex process where we talk about, disclosure of disability, which is a research review, itself, and might not be feasible for students. So just how we can make the environment as a whole better, more universally supportive, so that students can get that, college experience of learning and growth.
Great. Maura? Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan that this is just the start, and there's so much more to the story and so many more research reviews to come to sort of flesh out the whole thing. But numbers do make sense to me as a place where we would start. So my aha moment in going through this process was really just like how we really have no good numbers. We don't have a good count of the students with disabilities in higher education. And I kind of knew that part, but sort of thinking through, like, if you don't have good numbers, if you can't identify people, then you're not going to have a good idea of an accurate measure of the outcomes and everything else that follows. And then on top of that, we may be in a situation where we may never get good numbers. It's not just a situation of, trying to measure things a little bit better. And there's many, many different reasons for that. So one listed in the research synthesis is there's a lot of students that are just realizing that they have a disability. So they know that they might have difficulty with something or might be wanting to ask for accommodations, but sort of recognizing that that's something that is diagnosable and you can register for accommodations and request those accommodations. That can be a process for students while they're in college. And then there's the issue of, who's comfortable admitting on a survey that they identify as having a disability. So for me, I'm, perfectly comfortable saying that I'm dealing with depression, but I still hesitate when I come across a form or a survey that says, do you identify as having a disability? I'm sort of still processing that and still thinking about that. So even of the students who are comfortable reporting on a survey that they have a disability, only 50%, about half, of those students are continuing to report to their institution by way of registering with the Student with Disabilities office, going through the process of getting formal accommodations. And then, even if you've been through that process with the office, we remember that in higher education, every semester, students are getting a whole new set of instructors that they have to have this conversation with again. And it's a process of renegotiating, what does this accommodation look like in this class? And we also know from other research and interviews with students, unfortunately, that a lot of students they're not even bothering. They've had so many negative experiences disclosing to instructors or requesting things, or just sort of being forgetful and not following through on things that they need, that they've decided it is not worth the energy to mention this to my professor. So a lot of places where that process breaks down and sort of gets us to, we need to think about changing the system so that it's not, we're not thinking about accommodations for individual students and putting the onus on students to go through all of the steps to get their accommodations. Why don't we just figure out how to make higher education more accessible?
Well, thank you. We have a question from the audience that I'd like to share with you just to see what you think. It's related to the social aspect, really, and support in that space. And so the question is about the Disability Cultural Center, just in general. So, and that was mentioned by some students, I think. And so I'm thinking, Ryan, maybe you've seen that already throughout your student interview project, is the mention of what kind of organizations or clubs or centers are available that sort of helps with the social aspect of this time in their life. And the study this year is going to go more in depth. We've got another one on deck for the Cultural Center, and we'll be able to share that soon. But Ryan, I wonder if there's anything about the Cultural Center that you've seen thus far in terms of your impressions and what have you with social support.
Yeah, definitely. I'll preface this response by saying the types of resources that are made available to students vary, from school to school. So in some of the conversations that I've had with students, they have, an accommodations office, essentially. A lot of times it's a disability resource center. And, sometimes they have something that's more geared towards social aspects of student life, like the Disability Cultural Center at UT. But other times there really isn't kind of a formal space for programs geared towards social support for disabled students to exist on campus. And so I think those are definitely helpful because it creates a partition a little bit between systems of like academic support and social support. And there are already kind of connotations that students have about disability resources centers and like accommodations processes, especially them being kind of maybe siloed or bureaucratic, is a word that I heard a lot in my interviews. And then when I looked at the research, had realized that that was word for word a phenomenon that's been kind of widely found when researching with disabled students. And so, you know, if those are all lumped into one sort of idea in students' head, they might, you know, rely on those negative experiences that they've had with the accommodations process, the formal, you know, registration process, and might not want to, you know, seek out any kind of social programs. So I think it's helpful to have kind of a separate sort of like space that's specifically focused on like building community and social connection. And then when that's not available, it's important to be able to make other extracurricular activities, student organizations, events held on campus accessible, so that students can engage with their peers, not necessarily going to a place that's specifically outfitted for disabled undergraduates, but going to universal events and feeling as though they can engage fully in those. And from what I've learned from students, they will find their people if they have access to those spaces. And they will find that sense of relatedness with other students. So great to have those resources, those formal centers. Even better to just make all the events accessible, and maybe not have as much of a need for kind of like that cultural center.
Maura, do you have anything from your perspective as faculty that you'd like to add to that?
No, I thought it was a great question and a great answer, and it's getting me thinking, but no, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Well, one thing to know is in year two, one of our studies will most definitely be analyzing the specifics of a cultural center. So, coming soon. Thank you both so much. I think we've run out of time for our panel and it went by so fast. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. And for those of you joining us today, if you'd like to reach out to either of them or have any follow-up questions, both of their contact information is on our website. So please do. Bye to both of you. Thanks again. Okay. Thank you to the panelists. Ah, awesome people, just awesome. So I wanted to share with you what is happening in year two, what's on deck for us. Our primary survey is focusing on faculty. Because year one, we focused on students, and now we're shifting focus to instructors and faculty on campus of all kinds, a variety of different contracts we've got coming. So we're going to be working on that. We've developed our current survey, and it aligns with the concept of accessibility that we've seen those measures developed thus far. We're going to be utilizing that. We'll be polling and surveying them. We're surveying, that we'll send it out in early spring. February is what we've got scheduled. And then after that, we'll have some interviews again. We're going to follow the same model that we did with our students. And it'll be faculty of a variety of backgrounds and fields, training, specialties, familiarity with accessibility, and we'll share the findings in the fall of 2025. So that study is categorized as study number 5 out of a total of 10 for our center. So I just wanted you to know what we were thinking about and some things that we are going to get to know from them. And a way we're going to find that out is another poll to get some feedback from all of you to see what you think is important. Like, we already know, a syllabus, that's the primary way that faculty engage and establish their expectations, right? We know about an accommodations letter, super important. We know how faculty respond. We know that they receive those. So now we've got the second poll question up on your screen. So which of these do you find to be the most important that we ought to emphasize in our upcoming research project? What should we keep in the front and center of our mind? Now, if you have a second pick, because this is limited to your top choice, go ahead and put that in the chat so we can track those as well. Thank you. Okay, let's see what people said. All right, after taking a look here, attitude is far and away number one. Okay, and we see that often, and people just don't realize how much their attitude impacts so many different things, specifically students. It really impacts everything. And without an attitude shift in the positive direction, problem solving is really difficult. It really takes a backseat to attitude. The second thing that people said is mental health. Okay. And what happens in a crisis or an emergency situation, and how are we responding to mental health situations? Who are they calling? What sort of flexibility is able to be provided? Do you know what to do? Do you know how to respond? Because that's a hard one. Yeah, that's a hard one. And then the disabled perspective within materials. Okay, yeah, representation is everything. It is. And when we don't have disabled people normalized within the culture of academia, in the content and the materials, it really makes it so difficult. So if people realize that and say, oh, maybe we can spotlight successes of disabled people and students and how they contribute to the field of instruction. I think that is important. And then next we see how they handle letters of accommodation, because students say that was one thing that we found in our interviews, is that students would say two things: is that the faculty is awesome and they're really super welcoming and warm, and they invite problem solving and they're awesome and respectful. Or the other end of the spectrum, they cannot be bothered, they don't want to be around, they just say nope, we're not even dealing. And so it's a very interesting response, that the faculty seem to respond in a binary way. It's either yes, I'm all in, or nope, we're not doing this. And so that's really interesting. Some things that we've found along the way. And so part of our process in terms of figuring out how we design a survey is to capture what is happening within the faculty space in an inviting way. We're going to build this survey so we can give everyone a chance, even those folks on the farther end of the spectrum that say, nope, we're not doing this. It's still valuable to us to know the what and the why. Maybe they just don't have support within their institution, within that system that they work in. It's important that we acknowledge that. So we want to give the faculty a chance to explain why. What is their experience, the method, the concept, the tools that they use, technology for accessibility, because we want to see all of that. And so right now we're in the developmental stages of working on our matrix and our measures. So that is what we're doing now. I'm checking out the comments. So someone said all for that last poll, and then responding to crisis. Yeah. So for me, that just over time, I think it's a sense of how to respond. What does it look like? The resources on campus are super important, sure, but when you're in the midst of a crisis or an emergency, do you know where said card is with that number, who to call, who's specific? Do you know where it is? Do you know where to look? Do you have the accommodations letter specific to that person in crisis? Maybe you don't. Often you don't, not in an emergency situation. I mean, that is not set forth in the plan for accommodations in that letter. So what do we do? How do we do it? So that's our new study for next year that we'll be focusing on. And I look forward to seeing what you think. And we are gonna maybe need some help with recruiting and getting that study put in place. So if I could have the next slide, please, we'll talk about what we're doing now. We have an evaluation team internal, and that's just a part of our process. For important events specifically, it's internal staff. We always invite feedback and encourage feedback. So we're hopeful that you will share it with us after our event today. We've got the QR code that you can see right there on your screen, or the link was posted just now in the chat if you'd like to click on it. So please do. Just let us know what you think. What can we do? Where can we improve? What should we keep? What should we do? So the spring one, we have already decided our campus spotlight. The first one we've done is digital accessibility and how a campus thinks about digital accessibility on their learning platforms, Canvas or Blackboard or those type of spaces. What are they doing to encourage faculty to enhance or improve their access game, right? And so we're inviting people to be with us on the panel for that one. And I'm hopeful that we'll have that one spotlight specifically related to the Cultural Center available for you at that time. So that is February 20th. Next slide, please. I think we're ready for that. Okay, so here we are. So please be in touch. Join our communications network if you want to really have access to all of our information as we disseminate it. It can go to your organization and those members. It's not just for you. It can be for the people that you also work with, who you're in touch with, administrators, organizations. If you've got social media, we can give you content that you can disseminate, and that comes directly from our center, but you can post it. Our first webcast, I believe it is 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks from today. So we're excited to have 2 presentations just back to back here for the center. That one is 12 to 1 Central Time. So sort of a lunch and learn, brown bag type lunch situation. And then there's a save the date here for February 20th for our spring town hall meeting. We've already got that booked. And we will follow up via email as a wrap up from today. We'll post the video on the website for all of you. And other than that, just thank you so much. I appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much for coming. All right. We'll see you until next time. Bye-bye.